Hi, I'm Robbie Bobby, adult child and para-alcoholic. If you've watched the prior videos in this series, thank you. If you haven't, please do. It'll help you understand this one a little better. The purpose of this series is to better understand the relationship between two sets of steps that are used by the ACA program. This video will focus on Step 4, or rather, Steps 4 and 4, which are both inventory steps, although they take a different approach. We'll start with the original, which was introduced by AA in 1939, and later adopted by Al-Anon in 1951, and eventually by every other 12-step fellowship, including ACA in the 1980s. Step 4, Standard Version. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Okay, let's break this one down. Searching and fearless. This implies that it's deep. In other words, not a quick 5-minute review, which will miss 90% of what you need to see. This step often takes weeks or months and requires putting pen to paper. Moral. Moral implies right from wrong, but in the late 1930s, when the steps were written, it also meant honest. In other words, looking at yourself honestly, without rationalizing, justifying, or sugarcoating. By the way, steps 1, 2, and 3 break down the ego at least enough to be able to do this. An inventory is an assessment, an appraisal, an evaluation of ourselves and only of ourselves. Why? Well, first of all, we can only work on ourselves. We can't change or fix anyone else. Secondly, we're responsible for our own feelings, as well as our own decisions and actions, and the consequences of those decisions and actions. However, prior to recovery, we tend to blame others for everything. This enabled us to maintain the illusion that we are not the ones who needed help. An old-timer in my first step meeting used to say, "If I'm not to blame, there is no solution." I believe that for what brings us into program, this is 100% true. In other words, we're responsible for the unmanageability in our lives. So, an inventory is an honest assessment of ourselves, so that we can change what isn't working, or as the Serenity Prayer puts it, to change the things we can. Each 12-step program has its own tools, literature, and methods for carrying one out. AA has the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which outlines how the original members work the steps. Step 4 starts with making a list of resentments, and then expands out from there. Al-Anon has its own literature, which looks at the steps from a codependence perspective, including Blueprint for Progress, Al-Anon's Step 4 workbook, which includes roughly 24 character traits. One can spend months on this alone. Then there's ACA, which is concerned with the effects of growing up with alcoholism and other forms of dysfunction, which include codependency. The Yellow Steps workbook includes topics such as grief, shame, childhood trauma, and emotional abandonment. It also integrates the Tony A steps, which are aimed at healing the inner child through self-love and acceptance. Tony believed that as children we were victims, not perpetrators. As such, we developed defense mechanisms and survival traits at an early age, long before the character defects we developed later on. Tony A Step 4 is concerned with our foundational issues, with the dysfunction that was passed down from our parents. Step 4, Tony A version. We made a searching and blameless inventory of our parents because, in essence, we had become them. This step is founded on the principle that children internalize their parents. If you had an alcoholic, codependent, or any other type of dysfunctional parent, then you naturally absorbed some of that dysfunction as a child and carry it with you as an adult. ACA refers to this as the generational transfer of dysfunction. Therefore, we look at our parents to better understand ourselves, not to blame them. In fact, our parents' dysfunction was passed down by their parents, and so on down the line, or up the line. So who do you blame? In a general sense, no one. For specific incidents of abuse and neglect, we can hold them responsible, and we can decide whether or not to forgive them. However, for the purpose of this step, we seek only to understand our parents' dysfunctional behavior and distorted thinking, how it affected us as children, and how it affects us as adults. Does this mean we don't have to take responsibility for harm that we've caused to others as a result of our ACA traits or from character defects that we developed as adults? Of course not, but we deal with those issues using the standard steps, their root cause with the Tony A steps. As ACAs, we need both sets of steps, and we need to work them, not just talk about them. Having done both versions, I can tell you I didn't find them easy to do. In the standard step 4, the biggest obstacles were rationalization, justification, and denial. Often denial by definition. It takes time, so you have to give it time. I did my first inventory over 10 years ago, and I'm still discovering things about myself. Perhaps the biggest thing we get from doing step 4 is learning how to look at ourselves honestly. The same was true for the inventory of my parents. Some things were glaringly obvious. I put those down right away. Other things are more subtle and take time, so you need to give it time. Like the standard step 4, you never really finish. Instead, it becomes a work in progress, because as they say in program, more will be revealed. The bottom line is that we do the best we can within a reasonable amount of time and then move on to step 5, or steps 5 and 5, which will be the topic of the next video. And that wraps up this video, which was meant to be food for thought. If you got something out of it, please click like and subscribe and forward to a fellow traveler. I'm Robbie Bobby. Thank you for listening, and as always, keep coming back.